All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and as part of the Rankin Technical College AWD, or Application and Website Development Program, and in particular the AWD 1111.NET Framework with Web Databases class for the fall 2019 semester, I'm doing a series of video presentations based on the book for the AWD 1111 class. That book, as shown on screen here, is Pro ASP.NET MVC 5, an A-Press text by Adam Freeman. I'm working my way through Chapter 14 out of 27, and I left off on the top of page 391 using custom variables as action parameters. And the author mentions here using the route data.values property is only one way that you can access custom variables. The other way is more elegant. Again, I'm using the author's words here. If we define parameters to the action method with names that match the URL pattern variables, the MVC framework will pass the values obtained from the URL as parameters in the action method. All right. So the author has us come in here and make the change in our custom variable. I'm just going to grab, I'm going to grab the whole 9 yards here. Come back to here. Change it. What have we changed? Basically, it's been this line right here, and we've added this. So when the routing system matches a URL against the route defined here, the value of the third segment is assigned to the custom variable ID. The framework then compares the list of segment variables with a list of action method parameters, and if the names match, it passes those values from the URL to the method. We've defined the ID as a string, but the MVC framework will try to convert it to whatever parameter type is defined. Now the MVC, and this is mentioned here in the book, on the bottom of the note in the bottom here of page 391, uses a model binding feature to convert values contained in the URL to .NET types, which this will be covered in Chapter 24. All right. Bottom of 391 and going on to the next page here, defining optional URL segments. An optional URL segment, as mentioned there, is one that the user does not need to specify, but for which no default value is specified. All right. There's an example on the next page here. You can see it right there. So what we've done is we specified that a segment variable is optional by setting its default value to URL parameter .optional. All right, and you'll notice there still matches except if you have too many segments. Now, one thing to realize, this is not, I'm breaking away from the book a little bit here, but just so you see this, is if I go back into my route config file, this is the default one. That's how it's done in the default. So in other words, we should be, what I'm about to show you should work. Notice it's going to go to the home by default, so it'll say home index, etc. Should. But we should be able to come in here and say home index, oops, need my slash before the word home, and I should be able to put in, for example, 23. Still works. It's not showing it because we didn't ask for any parameters to be shown. I should be able to put hello. Still works. I should be able to put in true, and you notice it's still working, and it is converting the parameter for us to the right type. All right. So again, I'm on page 392, and as the author mentions here, it says, as you can see from the table, the ID variable is added to the set of variables only when there is a corresponding segment. The feature is useful if you need to know whether a user has supplied a value for a segment variable. When no value is supplied, the value will be null. So here we've updated what we worked on before with this. We are changing, not there, we are changing the line. Get rid of some of this stuff here. This line to basically say, hey, use the ID. The question mark means if it's not there, if it's null, put in no value. So how does that work? Well, first of all, let's do a file save all. And as we did before, once this comes up, we will come in here and put in /home/index, not index, home, custom variable / hello we did before, and we see it. We come in there and put in 23, we see that. But if we put in nothing now, it says no value. This value right there, that no value, that's the code that we added right here. All right. Hopefully that makes sense to everyone. All right, page 393 here, using optional URL segments to enforce separations of concerns. Some developers focused on the separation of concerns in the MVC pattern do not like putting the default values for segment variables into the routes of the application. If there is an issue, you can use C# optional parameters along with an optional segment variable to define this. So the author shows yet another way this can be done in our custom variable. Method. It says there will always be a value for the ID parameter, either the one in the URL or the default, which will say default ID. All right, turning up to page 394. Halfway down is another unit test, so I'm going to skip that. All right, the bottom of the page, another way of changing the default conservatism of URL patterns is to accept the variable number of URL segments. This allows you to route URLs of arbitrary lengths with an arbitrary number of parameters in a single route. You define support for variable segments by designating one of the segment variables as catch-all, done by prefixing it with an asterisk. All right, so if we go back again and we look at our route config that we put in here earlier, I think this is the one that we added here. So now we can come in here and after, maybe that's not the one. Why don't we just add another one? We'll just add it right there. Again, we're getting the error because it's only partially done. Don't let that bother you. Okay, I prettied it up quite a bit. So let's see. The key thing is here. All right. All right. So the author shows on page 395 the result of this, and you'll notice that now, even when we have an extra number of parameters passed, because we did the catch-all with a segment variable on one of the segment variables, it'll work. So the author mentions underneath this, there is no upper limit to the number of segments that the URL pattern will match in this kind of case. All right. Bottom of 395, the rest of the page is another unit test, which I'm skipping. I'm at 11 minutes, not a super great place to start or stop, but the one that I think I'll go on. And we'll do this next section here, prioritizing controllers by namespaces. We'll get done with this one, all right? So, when an upcoming URL matches a route, the MVC framework takes the value of the controller variable and looks for an appropriate name. For example, when the value of the controller name is home, then the MVC looks for a name controller called home controller. This is an unqualified class name, which means the MVC framework doesn't know what to do if there's two or more of these. So in other words, if there's two home controllers and it finds both, it won't know which one to use. All right, so what we're going to want to do is create a new folder in the root called additional controllers. So we want a new controller in here. I think they mean to do it here. All right, there is additional controllers. They said in the root, and they didn't say in the controllers folder. So add a new home controller and set the contents to this. Save all. Now I went back and just quickly looked. Maybe you saw this yourselves, that when I went back down to the route config, now there's a bunch of errors in here. So I'm going to take this last one here that I've just done, and I'm going to comment it out, because I think at least that's probably where the error lies. Okay, there we go. All right. Now we've got two home controllers. Granted, they're in different places in the project, but there are two home controllers. So let's do a file, save all, and let's run it and see if it works, or if we get the error shown on page 396. The error that they're talking about is this one. And there you go, multiple types. They mention here on the top of page 397, the author says the MVC framework searched for a class called home controller and found two of them. The problem arises more often than you might expect, especially if you're working on a large project that uses libraries of controllers from other development teams or third-party suppliers. To address this problem, as mentioned here, close this, on page 397, says you can tell the MVC framework to give preference to certain namespaces. So let's put this in here. And we'll put that up at the top. Hopefully that won't give us any errors. And again, what's new here is this. We're expressing the namespaces as an array of strings. We've told the MVC framework to look in the URL and routes.additional controllers namespace before going anywhere else. All right, to see if this works, File, Save All. Let's run the application again and verify that we did not get any error. We did. Oh, I've got a my route someplace else. So let's grab this one and also comment that out. That error, just so you know, has nothing to do with the problem or what we just put in. It has to do with the fact that we've got two things called by the same name. Let's run it one more time. And as you can see, the same thing as what's shown in figure 1512 on the bottom of page 397. The system did now go and it went to the additional controllers home controller. Then the author says here, let's stop the run. On page 398, what if we added them both? All right. We'd get the same error that we got before. All right. If we want to give preference to a single controller in one namespace but have all the other controllers resolved other places, we've got to add this. I'm leaving that out because it's getting pretty doggone heavy. This first route will apply, as the author says, when the user explicitly requests a URL where the first segment is home. Okay? All other requests will be handled by the one in the controllers folder. All right, the next thing that's in here, starting on page 399, is constraining routes. Before I get into that, because I'm already at 18 minutes, let's stop where we are right now, and we'll continue on in just a couple minutes.